Hey, this is Pierre Villacque talking. I wanted to talk about this subject. When do you choose to have several teams, or when is it better to have several channels? Because a lot of my customers are confused with that concept, and it's confusing actually. It's hard. It's a hard decision. So I try to explain what are the options here. There's no one option. It really depends on the context. So either you have one team with different channels, knowing that you always have the general channel, so channel A, B, C, or you have a team A, team B, team C, etc. So I made this grid to help you to make some decision here and explaining the pros and cons. So the first scenario is one team, several channels. So the pros are when you have one team and several channels, you just have to invite people once. If you have several teams, you have to invite them over and over for each team if they're the same people. So that's one benefit of having one team. Um, Everything is in one place, so you're in the team and you see all the channel, and so that's a benefit. You don't have to switch between teams or search for different teams. And also one benefit is if you go into one channel and you go into the private the files tab, and you navigate up a notch, you and in the document library, and you can sync all the library, and so you'll see all the folders. They're all are channels, so then you can navigate all your documents in the file explorer through this one folder and all the subfolders. So it's easier maybe for you to navigate all those files. But there are some cons, and I didn't list all the cons, all the limits. But obviously, it means you need to understand the concept of teams. When you have access to a team, usually you have access to all the channels. So maybe you don't want them people to have access to all the channels. You can create some exceptions with private channels, but still, you have to ask you this question. And also, when you decide to create a private channel, if you want to limit the access to one channel, you cannot reverse to a standard channel. That's a huge limitation, because actually, when you create a private channel, it creates a separate SharePoint site. So you cannot reverse. So that means you need to know in advance if all the channels you're creating gonna be accessible to all the people in teams. Because if you don't, that means you're gonna hand with just private channels. So that's gonna be a problem. Or what happens more often is, oh, I want to share this file with somebody who's not in the team, but I don't want them to see the team. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna send an email with a link, and then you back in email madness. So you don't want that. So you need to think about this. Do you know if the channels is open to everybody within the team or not? And either you say no, and then you're going to go a private channel, and then there's other problems with private channels, because then you need to be sure that people who are in the team, invited in the team, can and you want them to have access to this channel, can see all the other channels. So that's another point to have in mind. Also, if you have channels, you cannot organize them because they're, for whatever reason, I don't know why Microsoft doesn't move on this, but for whatever reason, it's in alphabetical order. So you can cheat a little bit by putting a number in front of it. So that's a way to organize them, but it's pretty not that user friendly. And also, if you have too many channels, then it's hard to navigate. There's another limitation. This, I think, not sure, but around 300 limit in channels. So think about it. In some situation, if you have 300 things that you want to put in a team, that's not going to work. But that might not be wise to have 300 channels. So when to use it? So if it's okay that all member can access all channels except for the private channels, maybe it's a good way to go. If the channels are related somehow, that makes sense because that means you want to be in the same environment, in the same workplace, so in the same team. So it can make sense. So now the next scenario, maybe I should have several teams instead of several channels. So what are the pros? So the first one is you control, who's getting into the team, and you perfectly know for each team who has control. It can be different from one team to the other. So there's a better permission control, and users are, not in each team. You can make them. I mean, each team may, and then maybe you should think about having one team with several channels. But if there are different people, you might want to have a different team. You can, change this. You can switch back from private to public. With private channel, you cannot switch back to standard channel. Here you can. And you can organize also your teams in your environment. You can, make this team on top and another team on the bottom. You can move them around wherever. You can hide the team however you want. You can also hide the channel. So the cons are, you need to invite people for each team. So if you have, 5 teams with 200 people, you need to do 200 times 5 invitation. That might not be super easy, even if I think you can use groups to invite people, but still it might not be the best option here. So it really depends on maybe also the size of your team, but I will say large team, they're rare, very rare. Because the concept, the word as a meaning, team is more for team. So a team of 200 people, you can challenge that. Also, as a con, if you want to synchronize in your File Explorer your folders, then you have to do that for each team and synchronize each team. So it might take longer and it might be cumbersome for you to navigate those files because you will have different folder. But with if you can pin a folder in your quick access bar in File Explorer, you can find your way pretty easily. So it's not a big issue. But it's true that when you have too many teams, for example, I have 100 teams, and it's not that easy to navigate all those teams. I think Microsoft can make progress here because you have to scroll. Since you move them all around the way you want to, you might not see it directly. When you search, the limitation of searching, you can find them. There's a wheel on the bottom of your screen. You can click there and see all your teams, and you can search and find the one. But then it jumps into the team, but you don't see all the channels. You have to go a click, 1 or 2 click um, away to find the channel individually. It doesn't. I will be very happy when Microsoft is bringing this feature. So when you select a channel in a team, it will highlight the team on the left tray, which is not the case now for whatever reason. It doesn't make any sense. But that's one of the limitation. And so when to use it, I think in general, if the permissions are fluctuating, you're in a better place if you're using several teams. And if you want to avoid the confusion uh, with what you're discussing in the team, you don't want to pollute people with so many channels and a lot of conversation in all channels. So you just focus on one team with one or a few channels so they can focus on what is really key. So let me give you a few examples here. In general, that's my recommendation, but there's always some exceptions. But in general, when you're managing projects, I really recommend to go with several teams, one team per project, because um, it's probable that, for example, in a team, in a project, you will have several subjects of discussion, several streams, work streams, and so you will need channels actually to focus on different discussion of different topics. So it's better because if you have several channels in one team, then you don't have really room for discussion for sub-subjects. So you need to have a team for that. And what if you discover if you had several channels? What if you discover along the way along the project that maybe the one project you don't want people to have access to, so then you cannot revert it to private channel because that's a choice to be made at first. Um, so that's the reason why I recommend to have a project team dedicated to the project, to avoid that kind of issue that you need to know everything beforehand. Um, and so, also, if you want to invite people to a project that is private, you will need first to invite them to the general team if you were in the scenario with several channels. Just because you want them to have access to a project, so private project D here in this example, you will have to invite them to the general project, and maybe you don't want them to see other projects, or you don't want to pollute them with other projects. So it can be very confusing if you have a team with several channels for each project. Very confusing. So my recommendation is, in that case, is to have a team per project. Another example is when you have a departmental team. So let's say you have an HR team, an IT team, and when you want to share in general resources with the organization. So what do you do then? So here you're not going to create a team for each resources. Like I say, IT, there might be an infrastructure resource list of resources or discussion. You might have a security. You might have what else? You might have help desk. You might have all the topics you can find in an IT department. HR, same thing. You might have something for the policy, HR policy. You might have something to training for training. You might have something for, I don't know, onboarding, stuff like that. So it's better to have one team with several channels, because first you don't want people to navigate in a bunch of teams, and be lost. And where is the cyber security? Where is help desk? Where is this and this and this? You might want to centralize this in the departmental team with different channels. And if you want to have a private discussion with a subset of users, like for example for HR, you might want to have a private discussion about reviewing process or the reviews. Then you can create a private, and at first it's going to be private. So, and you only invite people from HR who can discuss about the review process. So then you can do that in a private channel. And finally, all discussion regarding your department are in one place. So when people join the HR team, they can see the discussion about training, they can see the discussion about onboarding, they can see the discussion about the policies in one place. You don't have to go in different environment. So in that case, there's having one team with several channels is the best option, I will say. So it's really a matter of understanding. I think what is key is to understand, some limitations regarding the private channels, regarding the fact that you cannot revert a channel from standard to private or private to channel. Probably the amount of people in your team, because here in the departmental team, if you had to create different teams for the department, that means if you want to invite all the organization, that means you need to or most of the organization, it means you need to recreate those teams and invite